Let's talk about work as a Bible study, a biblical view of work. You know, the reason I'm making this, I see so many people today. It used to just be, the lazy young man. No, not at all. I know people from every age group that refuse. Now, I want to say this in a certain way. They refuse to better their life through work. They have fully convinced themselves that work is their enemy. Wow. These are the same people that stay at home and play video games. Now, you don't have to be 25 years old to stay home and play video games anymore. I know 65-year-old guys, believe it or not, they get up, they don't work, they never leave their house, they play video games. They view work as their enemy. They have somewhere along the line in their life, they have convinced themselves that going to work is harming them. Going to work is against them. Going to work is causing them pain, and going to work is causing all their problems. Boy, I tell you, I feel sorry for these people. I feel sorry for anyone who doesn't work on a daily basis. Now, I'm 63 years old. I'm retired, but I work every day at stuff. I just don't punch a time clock and get paid. I get paid in other ways. But I'll work 10 hours a day like it's nothing. I'm just not going down anymore and punching in at the old factory and making $100. But work is work. That's the deal. You see, we got to separate work away from money. The purpose of work is not to get money. Money is one of the benefits that you receive from working. Now, here is what most people have backwards. In today's society, you say, you put the cart before the horse. The horse is supposed to be ahead of the cart, pulling the cart. But you're putting the cart before the horse. So what you do is you saddle up, not saddle, you harness up the horse. Then you walk the horse over, back it in, pull the cart up, and harness the two arms of the cart. And then you walk around the field with the horse and the cart, filling the cart with the good things you find, your crops, or you're taking rocks out of the field, or you're looking for rocks to make a brick house or a fireplace. I'm talking 100 years ago, 150 years ago. You say, well, that's not going to help me. Well, it will help you if you listen. What you're doing in today's society, since about the year 1990s it started, but it really took off about 2010, where everybody is on steroids with shopping. I just told my wife this morning, actually. I said, wow. It's amazing. I live in a town of 10,000 people. When I moved here, the town was approximately 10,000. And now 23 years later, the town's approximately the same size of 10,000. And you know, this little town, the post office has quadrupled. The post office has quadrupled. It's ironic. I'm making a video about work, and a homeless guy just walked by. About 55 years old. And he stays down here by the river. Just do nothing all day long. He's only got one backpack. No place to live, one backpack. He doesn't have a sleeping bag or nothing. He hasn't showered in like 3 weeks. We'll get into that, but now he just laid down in the grass to take a nap, and it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm not making this up. See, what you're doing is you're filling up the cart, and then you're going to hook the horse up after the cart is full. You say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, because this isn't, 1850 or 1950. This is 2025. And what your problem is in this world is what you're filling your cart up with. You're not filling your cart up with chopped wood. You had to work, cut down the wood, chop the wood, fill the cart. Now you got enough wood for the winter to stay warm. No, that's good. You're not filling up your cart with potatoes and squash or melons, to survive and have enough food for the whole winter. No. That would be good. That means you work. You got a crop. You're harvesting the crop. What you're doing today in 2025 is you start right away and you fill up your cart with student loan debt. And then you fill up your cart with credit card debt while you're in college. Then you get out and you get an automobile loan and you fill up your cart with your automobile loan. Now you got student loan debt, credit card debt, automobile loans. Then you meet a nice girl, and she has student loan debt, credit card debt, and automobile loan. She has a car payment. And now your problems have doubled. You say, well, no, we got double the income. Well, that's if you get married and commit a lifetime to each other. But you still have to pay off both of your problems. And then what happens next is you receive a lot of pressure in this world to buy a house. Then once you have the house, you got to sign up for your 401k at work. That takes another 5% of your check every week. Takes 5% of your wife's check every week. Well, we're going to have something someday. Donald Trump just mentioned one way that poor people can buy houses now is he wants to start a 50-year mortgage. It's a law. You can't have a mortgage over 30 years. That's why they call it refinancing, so they can refinance you and start you all over. But Donald Trump says it doesn't even make sense. I don't even know why he came up with this. It's crazy. I can't believe a guy as intelligent as him could come up with this. We're going to take poor people who cannot afford the $3,000 a month payment. We're going to put them on a 50-year loan and lower that to $1,700 a month. For 20 extra years. And we're going to say that we're helping them. Wow. The purpose of work is not the same as the purpose of money. They're not the same thing. Let's go over work. There was the Garden of Eden. There was the fall in the Garden of Eden, the sin. And God said, by the sweat of your brow you shall now earn your food. Meaning, you're going to have to become a gardener, a farmer, a rancher, and go out and sweat, and the weeds and the thorns and the thistles, you're going to have to work for your food because you sinned. Okay, so you come up to 2025, work is to provide your food. It's not to provide a $450,000 house. Because that's not in the Bible. It's not in the Bible. God never said to anyone in the Bible, I want you to go into debt to buy a house. I don't care if it's 100,000 or 600,000. God never told anyone, go into debt to buy a house. That is not a wise man, that's a fool. God said, work is to keep your muscles going, keep your arms and legs muscular, your mind sharp. You ever wonder why we have all the problems we have in the United States of America after the age of 65 years old? The word retirement is not in the Bible. Do you know that God has been working every day? It says God on the sixth day, God rested, but Jesus says, my Father is at work even to this day working. So Jesus told us that his Father works nonstop all the time, taking care of his children. So work, all our problems in America start after 65 years old, and I believe most of it is because people stop working. I read a story about a guy, he invented something in his early 20s. He sold it at 30 years old for $500 million. He said he retired for 8 years, and he said it was the worst 8 years of his life. He said it was completely boring. No purpose. That's another thing. Work is to give you purpose. In the book of Ecclesiastes, work is for your food and for your hands to find something that you enjoy doing. And then in the Bible it says, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might to the glory of God. Your hands are to not stop working your whole life. And golf or fishing does not count. You cannot claim you're working to glorify God's name by golfing. No. Or by getting in a $50,000 boat and just floating around hoping to catch a fish. No. God has standards, and God's not going to change your standards or change his standards because our standards are low. God has very high standards of perfection. We have very low standards. Like that country song. I go to see all my friends in low places. That would describe the majority of Americans today. You know, you see your friend in the morning at the donut shop. Then you go to a job you hate. Then you see your friend at the fast food restaurant for lunch. And then you go back to a job you hate. Then you see your friend at the deli selling 3 times overpriced food because you want your food cooked immediately and unhealthy, full of grease and fats and sugars and salts. Why do you think that food tastes so good? You can make anything taste good if you throw enough salt and sugar on it. That's all America is. It's salt and sugar. Sugar and salt. Salt and sugar. You can take the most boring steak, dip it in a bunch of salt and sugar, and you'll love that steak. Why do you think fried chicken tastes so good? They just soak it in salt, and then they fry it in a sugar-type sweet breading. What do you think barbecue sauce is? Turn the label around. It's all sugar and all salt, sodium. What do you think Heinz ketchup is made out of? You think it's made out of tomatoes? No, it's made out of sugar and vinegar and salt. So what is the purpose of work? First, it's to glorify God's name. Second, it's to get your food. Number 3 is to keep you going every single day. I think it's sad that we take senior citizens, even their families don't want them. They drive them down to the nursing home and they just sit there all day, walk around in circles. My grandpa worked till almost 80 years old. My grandpa worked up until about a month before he passed away. My dad's was almost 70 years old when he passed away. My dad's last day on this earth was he drove the semi-truck 12 hours. He came home, laid down to put to take a quick half-hour nap before he was going to eat dinner, and he never woke up again. My other grandpa lived to be in his over 80s, and he farmed up until about 3 months before he passed away. You know, I know a lot of farmers, 90 years old, they are outside working at sunrise. Okay, so work is to glorify God's name. Number 2, to give you your food for you and your family. Number 3, to keep your muscles, your mind going, your mind sharp, your legs moving. You know, I had a neighbor a while back. So, he was pushing 70 years old. And he was complaining. He told me the doctor said he has to go walking 2 miles a day now. I said, yeah, well, you're supposed to walk at least 3 miles a day just as a normal person. His legs were getting a little fat, puffy, because of inactivity. So then he walked, 2 miles a day, and 6 months later, all his problems went away. The sickness or disease in his legs completely disappeared. His blood started flowing again. He was a completely happy person. I said, you can solve 2 problems at once here, my friend. He said, yeah. I told him, why don't you go work somewhere 2 days a week? He was on Social Security. I said, you could work 2 days a week. bring home $700 a month by doing the walking that the doctor told you to do. Back in the Midwest, I know farmers that are millionaires. They don't need to work. They could travel the world. They could do anything they want. They're debt-free. They're worth $3 million in the bank, plus the land. So they're worth a lot more than that if they ever sold the land, but they'll never sell the land. They got 320 acres. Some of them got 400 acres. They get up every day and work, and their children work in town, at jobs in town. Lawyer, nurse. Here, the dad, who's over 80 years old, is worth about $5 million just from farming. Why? Well, he inherited the farm with no debt. He never bought a combine. He never bought one of those $800,000 combines. Yeah, a combine is $800,000 for a used one. And you're not allowed to work on it yourself. Well, some guys can't even work on it. This guy still drives like a $20,000 John Deere tractor. And he never went into debt, so every year he's been saving, for the last 60 years of farming, he's been saving money. So I don't want this to go too long, but the purpose of work is to glorify God's name, get your food for you and your family. And so your hands and your legs and your eyes and your feet and your brain and your heart and your lungs and your kidneys and your liver, your toes, your fingers, your back get stronger, have something to do. And then comes the money. And that money is supposed to buy you a very simple house. You want to know, back 80 years ago, the average American bought an 800 square foot house. Even if you had 5 or 6 kids, because children were temporary. Most people bought the house they were going to spend the rest of their lives in. Because you say, okay, we got 4 children. Or back then, 5 children. But they're all staggered. You got one every couple years. And then so the parents would say, okay, well, we got 5 children for like 15 years, and then one goes off on their own. Then we only got 4, and pretty soon we only have 1 left, and that one goes off, and then it's just the husband and wife again in a very large, 800 square foot, because then it would seem very large. And they paid it off a long time ago. And now that the children are all gone, they're only 50 years old, all their children are gone. And now they're still working, and now they can save all that money they spent on their kids. They can now save it. So when Donald Trump comes along and says, hey, we're going to have a 50-year mortgage because he says it'll help poor people. No, you want to know what will help poor people? Buy a 1,000 square foot house and live in it for 40 years. Buy a house that's only $150,000. And you say, well, where do I find a $150,000 house? All over America, anywhere, there's still $150,000 houses for sale every single day. There's $150,000 houses for sale in San Francisco. And that's the biggest lie. You know, you say, no, there's not. People call up, I make $250,000 in San Francisco and I can't survive. And I would ask those people, well, how does the Mexican lady survive working at the Burger King? Because she's surviving. I say Burger King hires a lot of Mexicans because they're extremely hard workers. They make a lot of Mexicans managers because they're extremely hard workers. They do that around here, up and down the Oregon coast. You go into a Burger King that's run by, I'm not making this up, you go into a Burger King that's run by white people and it's total confusion. You go into a Burger King that's run by all Mexicans and boom, boom, boom. 3 minutes later, you got a nice, fresh, juicy Burger King, BK Deluxe, whatever, right in front of you. Fresh French fries, everything. They do the job, they do it good, and they do it fast. That shit, I know. I was in the restaurant business. I think it's just because of their heritage, the way they were born and raised. They weren't raised in, Americans today, we raised our children to sit around at home in the basement till they're 30 years old playing video games. And they don't know any better, so they sit down in the basement playing video games saying, oh, woe to me, I'm being punished, woe to me. It's like, what's your problem? Oh, the world's against me. You say, what do you mean the world's against you? You haven't done anything yet. They say, well, I can't get a job. I was talking to a younger guy, really middle-aged. He was 40 years old. Just complain about his life, his job. He's single, no kids, never been married. I said, you seem pretty miserable. I mean, he only has a job at a grocery store. Like pushing carts, changing garbage, and cleaning the bathrooms. That's it. He makes like $18 an hour. He doesn't even stock the shelves. 40 hours a week. And he lives with his mother. But I know him, so I said, you seem kind of miserable in life. He went into it. My job. I said, well, let me, just for our sake of argument, let's say everything you say is true. He's like, okay. Is this how you're planning on living for 25 years until you're 65 years old? You're going to be miserable? He says, well, I hope not. I said, you live with your mother. You don't even pay rent. You bring home $600 or $550 a week. You don't even have a car payment. You just don't understand. You're one of the most blessed people in America. You literally have like $1,500 extra a month. So what we're doing is we don't understand what work is, and we don't understand what the purpose of money is. You know, I was listening to a minister talk on the Christian radio. You know, the verse, God wants to give you all things. He said, in America today, you think that actually means a $500,000 house and a $50,000 car and $10,000 vacations every year. He said, that's not what God's talking about. And he went on to, you know, say the same things I say. This is what's making you miserable today. See, I personally wake up debt-free every day. I'm 100% debt-free. I've been debt-free for many, 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 many years. So let me wrap this up here. You go to work. The purpose of work is, one, glorify God's name. Number two, get food for you and your family. Number three, find something your hands enjoy doing. I like the way the Bible puts that, because, you know, when you're working, you're using your hands all day. Find something your hands enjoy doing. You know, I knew a guy who had one arm. I think this guy, honestly, he was in Vietnam. And he lost one of his arms in Vietnam. You know, that guy refused to go on disability. I watched that guy work for 20 years at a gas station. He never bought a car. He's never owned a car. And he walks everywhere. He walks to the store. He refused to stop working. And he only had one arm. Think about that. How many people with, you know, perfectly healthy, they've already convinced, and it's a battle of the mind. You know, the one-arm guy, he told himself, I can do anything. I'm never going to quit. They're not going to tell me I can't do it. While the healthy guy says, woe to me, you know, like the lazy sluggard, I can't turn over in my bed and go outside. The Bible says there's a lion outside. I can't go outside today because there's a lion outside. It says the sluggard, the lazy man, the sluggard is so lazy. This blows my mind. But it's in the Bible, Old Testament. It's either in Psalms or Proverbs. I think it's Proverbs. The sluggard will not even bring his hand from the dish back to his own mouth to feed himself. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, today, well, let me finish. Okay, so I told you what the purposes of work were. Now I'm going to tell you what the purpose of money is. The purpose of money is not to spend the money. The purpose, you know, and in 2025, it's the greatest money-making opportunities in the history of the United States. Anybody can go get $20 an hour and work 70 hours a week. Anywhere in America. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're 20 years old or 70 years old, you can go get $20 an hour and work 70 hours a week if you want to. Easily. You could easily be bringing home $1,200 a week in America. But that's not what money's for. The purpose of money is to not make more money. The purpose of money is to provide for God, to provide for you a Christ-driven life. Now let me go over it again. The purpose of work is to glorify God's name, provide food for you and your family, and to find something your hands enjoy doing. I see these guys go to the gym 3 or 4 hours a day. And I tell some of them, boy, you're really wasting a lot of time and money. They go, no, I'm not. The gym only costs like $50 a month. And you spend 4 hours a day there. Yeah. How often do you go? They say, I go 6 days a week. So you spend 24 hours a week there. Yeah. The gym is not costing you $50 a month. They say, yeah, it is. And I got big muscles. I said, if you were at work using those muscles at $20 an hour, I said, the gym is costing you $400 a week. And these young guys looked at me and went, wow, I never even thought about it that much like that. And then one of the guys says, yeah, but we lift weights and get big, strong muscles. I said, you can get real strong muscles by going down to a manual labor job. I said, isn't that what you're doing here, manual labor? Well, yeah. So if you went to a plant where you did manual labor at $20 an hour, instead of coming to the gym, you'd be getting the same muscular tone and they'd be paying you $400 a week to do it. You see, the purpose of work, glorify God's name, feed your family, and find something your hands enjoy doing. The purpose of money is not to spend the money. And let me tell you, the purpose of money is to never, ever, 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 ever borrow money. The Bible is extremely clear on this. The borrower is slave to the lender. You are a slave. God says when you borrow money, you instantly put yourself into slavery. Self-induced slavery. You sold yourself. You go down and buy, or you get a credit card, you sold yourself at 25% interest. You get a student loan, you sold a part of your future time to that loan, the government loan servicer. And they don't care about you. They don't care if you got money for food or not. You signed the bottom line and agreed to pay for the next 20 years this amount of money. And then you go down and get an automobile loan. The purpose of money is to never get a loan for anything. Well, how am I going to get back and forth to work? Well, you say you need a $70,000 used pickup to go back and forth to work. And I'm saying you just need to live within a mile of your work and walk to work. And then in 4 years, you can save $70,000. You can go down and buy a $10,000 car for cash and still have $60,000 in the bank. That is God's purpose for money. God's purpose for money is for you to get simple housing, your food, simple clothing, and to provide for your family's future as long as God lets you stay on this earth. And then you will become a wise man in Christ, and God will give you a long life, and then you give some of your children, after they're like 60 years old and they're smart enough to understand now, then they receive part of an inheritance from you. And that's the cycle that's supposed to continue. But what we're doing today, we're saying the purpose of work is to be miserable at a job I hate, and then to spend all my time complaining and making myself sick about it, mentally and spiritually. I'm making myself sick mentally and spiritually at this job. I'm convinced myself every day I hate this place. I'm being punished. And then whatever money I get to satisfy myself, I run out and borrow more money against the money I got. And you don't understand. You see, you're not doing God's will for your life concerning work. And you're not doing God's will for your life concerning money. So what do we have? Then we have people who are miserable, who turn to drugs. You turn to pornography. You turn to alcoholism. Then eventually you're homeless. Then eventually you're like the guy laying over here on the grass, you no longer care. You just you get your SNAP benefits, your food benefits. Maybe if you're lucky, you get your disability. Remember the young guy in his 30s who had $500 million, and he said, and he earned it. He had a company and sold it for $500 million. He said he tried to retire for 8 years. Said it was the most miserable 8 years of his life. So he went and started another company. He said, it's not about making money. He said, I found out it's about having something to do every day. He said, I spent 8 years managing my $500 million. It became a full-time job, and I was miserable. Why does Jeff Bezos work every day? He's like the second or third richest man in the world. Why does he go to work every day? Because work is not about money. Say, well, if I had, people are so stupid. Well, if I had $1 billion, it doesn't matter when you go with God's system. The day laborer can be just as happy, joyful, and fulfilled as the multimillionaire if you do it God's way. And God is, he looks down upon the earth, and he's waiting for people to, he's saying, I'm looking for people who want to do it. I'm looking for people who want to change. I'm looking for people who want to do my system, not their system. What we're doing is the system of misery and plus capitalism. We're putting the cart before the horse. We're filling the cart up. We're completely filling the cart up. And then we go out, we don't even own a horse. And then we're going to go out and try to buy a horse that's strong enough to pull this cart around. You ever see Americans move today? I mean, Americans moving has gone way down because of the housing problems and the high interest rates. Have you ever seen Americans try to move their 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom house today? I mean, they literally got like a semi truck showing up at their house to fill up all the stuff they own. I mean, if you need a semi truck trailer to pull up and fill your whole house won't even fit in the back of a semi trailer. You know, what are they, like 45 foot long? A big long trailer? And all your possessions will not fit in a 40-foot semi trailer? Wow. And then, you know, you have that driver drives you all the way down to Texas somewhere, and you got to get a bunch of guys for $5,000 to unload the trailer and put it all back in your new house. And nobody's doing this debt-free. It's all debt. It's all debt. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Let me go through it one more time. The purpose of work: glorify God's name, get food and drink for your family, and find something your hands, it's in the book of Ecclesiastes, find something your hands enjoy doing. Because when you enjoy your work, it's not really work. When you enjoy your work, you glorify God more. When you enjoy your work, you're living more of the Christian life. Jesus would have enjoyed his work. And the purpose of money, according to God, is not to invest money. Regardless of what these financial Christian programs tell you. The purpose of money is to not put all your money at risk. You know, you take some of these guys, you know, if everything collapsed, you know, they're worth like $400 million. And they're Christians. And they got all their money tied up into high-risk mutual funds in the stock market. And housing. If everything collapsed tomorrow, they would literally lose everything they had except for the money they had in a savings account that's FDIC insured. They would lose everything else. And they would not lose the houses that they have that are 100% paid for. But, you know, they might not be able to afford them anymore because, you know, the taxes and everything, plus the value of the house would go down 80%. So it would cost more to keep the house than it was worth. The only people that never, ever are completely broke are like in the Old Testament, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, you know, they had, you know, farmland full of crops. They had fruit trees. They had cattle. They had sheep. And then they had gold and silver. And then they had other types of money, whatever the money was in that area at the time. Then they had gold, silver, you know, grain, spices. You know, back then, some really fine spices was worth more than money. Food was worth more than money. So I say, in today's society, people just don't get it. We are living in the most prosperous time in the history of America, but it's not working for everyone. Well, I say it's not working for 75% of people because of debt. No one can say, I was praying, and God told me to go into debt for 30 years. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. God would not say that because God's never said that in the Bible. God would never tell. That would be contrary to the Word of God. God would never tell anyone to go into debt. You know, I've always said this. When you say to God, I have to go into debt because God's not providing enough for me, that's really what you're saying. I have to go into debt because God's not providing enough for me to live on. I say, well, do you work full time? Yeah. Does your wife work full time? Yeah. How much do you make? Well, we make $97,000 a year together. And you can't live? No, we're barely making it, they say. I say, you got to be kidding. I live on $20,000 a year. They say, how do you do that? No house payment, no car payment, no credit card payment. And they always say, here we go. Here the devil comes in the details. They always say, well, if you want to live like that, we don't want to live like that. I told a guy once how much I was living on. This was 20 years ago. I lived on $15,000 a year. Me and my wife. And the guy started laughing. He says, I wish I could do that. He said, last year, my wife spent $15,000 going to Europe on vacation. I said, well,
my jealousy and in the fire.
I had to let a bug out of the window and the radio came up. So the purpose of work, God's purpose of work, the purpose of money is to provide a simple house that you can pay off within 8 years to 10 years max. It'd be better if you just saved $100,000 and bought a house. You know, I don't understand. Well, I do understand why Christians don't understand. I understand they don't understand. It's okay to live in a $100,000 house that's paid for. You're happy, no credit cards, 2 used cars, and you have $300,000 in the bank. It's okay. They say, well, how would we get the $300,000? All the money you give to the credit cards, all the money you give to the automobile loans, all the money you give to the interest at the banks, the house, you now pay yourself. And they say, well, honestly, we do give away about $30,000 a year in interest and frivolous spending and stupid vacations to Disneyland or something. I say, well, imagine if you put $30,000 a year into a savings, you'd have $300,000 in no time at all. And they say, well, that's true. I have a friend who was going down to visit her daughter. It's going to cost like $3,000 to fly there, everything, to see her daughter for 3 days. Like, man, that's a lot of money. I just had to turn off the camera. I just saw a group of like 8 high school girls walk by. They must be having some kind of an event today. 8 high school girls walked by. And they were young high school girls. They were like in 10th or 11th grade. So something must be going on around here. And, you know, they were all smiling and joyful and happy. And, you know, not a single one of them had a credit card because they weren't 18. Do you know out of all 8 girls, not one of them was looking at the cell phone, which is really a change that's taking place among young people. They were looking at the seals out here, and they were looking at some kayakers out here, and they were all smiling. They never took their phone out to take a photo or nothing. They were very happy. And you know, not one of them had a house payment or a car payment. That's why they're so happy. You see, I myself, I'm happier with $20 than you are with $100. Because I found out a long time ago the purpose of work, God's purpose of work, and God's purpose of money. And the average American Christian today, they use the world's purpose for work and capitalism's purpose of money for money. You don't go on God's purpose, you go on capitalism's purpose. And well, if you do what God says, you will receive all the benefits from God. If you do what capitalism tells you, you will receive all the miseries of capitalism. And then if you grow old enough, capitalism will give you back some of your money the last 15 years of your life. Just some of your money. And then what you're doing is you're teaching your children, well, you got to follow commercialism, consumerism, and capitalism. You got to follow these 3 things, honey. And then when you get to be 65 years old, you'll be able to have some money. But what about the Word of God? What about spiritual? What about your relationship with Jesus over the past 40 years? If you talk to Jesus as much as you talk to your banker, your credit card, and your automobile loan, you and Jesus would know each other a lot more. And that's why the churches are starving today. Because the average Christian gives 2 car payments, $1,000 a month to the automobile, $3,000 a month to the bank mortgage, $400 a month to credit cards, and $80 a month to the church. You give more than $80 a month to your cell phone, and you give more to your cable bill than you do your pastor. Well, I'll wrap this up right now. God says, work, glorify my name, feed your family, find something your hands enjoy doing. God says money, get a simple house, simple clothing, support your church, put the rest in a secure bank, and live a joyful life. I think the Holy Spirit's telling me to end it this way. I'm going to end it this way. When you're a Christian and you just spent 50 years working your ass off for money, when you get up in front of Jesus in heaven, you're going to say, Lord, you provided everything I needed, and I gave my children a $100,000 inheritance, and I told them about you. We followed you, and I still had an extra $100,000 when I died at 90 years old. It won't make any difference at all if you go to see Jesus and you say, Lord, I'm still in heaven, but I died and I had $900,000 in the bank that I gave my children when I died. But it cost me 50 years of my life working and buying 2 or 3 houses and selling them. And It won't make any, God's not going to go up there and say, oh, really? You left $900,000 down there? God's not going to apologize to you for taking you off the earth away from your money. That's something you have convinced yourself of through the enemy, the devil. The purpose of money is not to collect and obtain money your whole life so when you die, you'll have a ton of money. I got a news flash for you. If you're dead, when you're dead, all your money is useless to you. Well, now comes the pride. Well, yeah, but. People will be saying, when I'm dead and I'm in that casket, people will be saying, that guy there had a lot of money. Well, I got another news flash for you. If your children are average, they are financially as dumb as a rock. Because they never did anything to get all that $800,000, $900,000, and now you gave it to them, and I don't care what age they are. You give a 50-year-old $900,000, he's going to turn into a very stupid 50-year-old. If you haven't learned what to do with money by the time you're 60 years old or 65 years old, you're not going to know what to do with money if you inherit a bunch of money. The Bible is very clear about money. Money is to be managed slowly and little by little. That is the only purpose of money. You cannot point to one verse in the Bible where it says that money is to be used to pleasure yourself exceedingly with all kinds of worldly pleasures. There's no verse in the Bible that even comes close to anything like that. I'm glad I found this out when I was about 25, 27 years old. The Lord taught me my whole lifetime. Money is going to be your enemy. Debt is your enemy. I was making a lot more than the average person back then. And before I was 25, 27 years old, I thought it was my job to go out and make $1 million. So I went through it. And the Lord opened my eyes. And I feel sorry for people Christians waking up today. God is your father, but you are living like a slave in debtor's prison. God is your father who will provide everything, even his son on the cross, even the kingdom to you, his child, and yet you've gone down to the debtors and signed yourself into a lifetime of slavery to have possessions. It's funny because even a 50-year-old was completely happy at 25 years old. Now they're 50 and they're miserable. A 40-year-old was entirely happy at 15 years old, and now they're 40 years old with a house payment. They're miserable. The debt is making you miserable. It's the debt that's making you miserable. You've sold your time to give your money to someone else. Say, yeah, but I got a nice house. Yeah, well, it costs a lot of money to have a nice house. Yeah, but my kids go to some of the best colleges. Yeah, it costs a lot of money to put those kids in those colleges. And you know how many kids, it's like, what, 40% today? They go to college, they get the degree, and they come out and they work as cashiers at Walmart or Target or the 24-hour gas station, or they stock shelves overnight at the grocery store. Oh, I got a degree, but the thing I got a degree in is no longer has any value. Society has changed so fast, those jobs aren't available anymore. Or the kid that goes down and spends $100,000 getting a degree in liberal arts. Woo! And their parents are like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. You could have got a degree in liberal arts on the internet for free, and they will actually send you a piece of paper, a degree in the mail for free. You know, they have Bibles, colleges online that'll send you to Bible college online for free, and you'll actually receive a degree in the mail for free. Well, I just end it right there. There's nothing better than waking up with Jesus, and you don't owe anyone a dime. You're 100% debt-free. You're debt-free spiritually. Your sin has been washed away and forgiven, so you're debt-free in the sin department. You're married. You have 2 incomes. You're happy. No house payment, no car payment, no credit cards, no payments at all whatsoever. And you're living on 60% of your income. Because you tell me, when's the last time money brought you joy, peace, and happiness? And when's the last time money guaranteed you eternal life? This guy was a wizard, and he saw that Paul was performing these incredible miracles. And this guy was an actual wizard, like a demon guy. Like he had a demon in him, giving him power. Kind of like from the old days of Pharaoh's, magicians. Moses would do something, and then Pharaoh's magicians would do the same thing because they had demons. And this wizard comes up to Paul and says, tell me how much it costs to get what you have. The guy looked at Paul and said, I will pay anything. Because the man knew if I could get the gift Paul has, I could quadruple my wealth. And Paul turned around and rebuked him and cursed him. Said, you will never receive what I have because you think you can buy the things of God. Well, let me make it very clear. The Bible's very clear. You're not buying the things of God. You're buying the things of capitalism. So whichever road you choose, don't ever convince yourself and lie to yourself, every time I spend money, I'm living a Christian, godly life, because that's not true. You're not buying the things of God. You're buying the things of a capitalistic United States of America. Now, capitalism has its purpose. It provides a lot of opportunity. I knew this Chinese guy worked in a deli until he was 70 years old. And then he got his full Social Security around 69. Every single day he ate. For breakfast, he had like a tea type substance he drank. And then for lunch, he took an hour every day. This was back when they only allowed a half hour. And he told the manager, I'll only work here if I get an hour for lunch. He said, it's very important to me. He was such a great employee. The manager said, all right, well, you can have an hour. I mean, you don't get paid for it, but go ahead and take an hour off for lunch. And he still worked 8 hours, but it was so important to his mental health. This Chinese guy said, there's no way I can enjoy my lunch break in 30 minutes. Now, this guy had been working at this deli for 20 years, from age 50 to 70. And every single day, every day he would walk out to the same place with a chair. And he had what he brought from home. He never ate food from a grocery store like that. He brought home what he made the night before, the Chinese rice with an egg and vegetables, and no soy sauce, and a little beef, sometimes pork, and mostly chicken. He'd switch, throughout the week. He'd have beef one day, then plain one day, then chicken 2 days, then plain, then pork one day, and then plain, and then beef the next day, to rotate. And he didn't eat hardly any meat, and the bowl would just fit in his hand, and he'd sit there with chopsticks, and it'd take him about 45 minutes to slowly eat his food and sip his tea. And then he would wipe his mouth. I mean, customers were walking right past him the whole time. They all knew his name. They're all saying hi. This was his time to enjoy. He said, that's what I used to do in China before I moved here and became an American citizen. This guy worked, his wife worked. They made about $50,000 a year together. Well, back then, that was good money. And they lived on $20,000. The guy saved $30,000 a year. He saved $30,000 a year. He's still alive today. Matter of fact, in a couple hours, he's probably going to sit down outside his house on a chair and enjoy his rice lunch. And then for dinner, he has a thing with his wife. He eats and he's happy. He has a used car. He has a $4,000 used car. You see, you are not working for the things of God. You are not using work in a godly way. You're not using money for the things of God. You're not using money the way God would use money, or the way God wants you to use money. We have very few wise Christians today in America, financially for sure, because you never read the Bible. And you spend every dime you get as fast as you get it. And you never give any of your time to Jesus Christ. That's why most American Christians are just as miserable as most American non-Christians. It drives ministers and pastors crazy today. There's no difference. If you were to take 100 Christians and 100 non-Christians just randomly out of society and mix them all up like a deck of cards, shuffle them all together and tell people, we want you to pick out the Christians and the non-Christians. They couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. You couldn't tell the difference between them because the Christians and the non-Christians are both living lives identically the same together. Christians look at pornography. Christians drink beer, wine, alcohol, whiskey. Christians smoke marijuana. Christians hate their job. Christians don't give much money to the church. Christians never read the Bible. Christians never pray. All Christians own a cell phone. All Christians play video games. All Christians watch 3 or 4 hours every night of TV. All Christians eat junk food, worldly junk food, every single day. How are you supposed to tell the Christians from the non-Christians? Every Christian buys a house, a mortgage for 30 years. Every Christian has credit cards. Every Christian has car payments. Every Christian has personal loans they took out or a second mortgage to redo their kitchen or their bathroom or their master bedroom. Every Christian in America today is living exactly like the non-Christians. In fact, I know millionaires who live more holy lives than the Christians, and these people don't believe in God at all. They're atheists. I say, well, you got a lot of money, but when you die, you don't believe in God at all. They go, nope, I just believe in evolution, the Big Bang, and when I die, I die. And they said, all my money will just go to some of the organizations that I believe in. Boy, they're going to be in for a heck of a shock. The only advantage Christians have is that when they die, they truly believed in Christ and they're going to go to heaven. But they wasted their whole life on earth chasing the miseries and the pleasures of this financial earth.